Oh, it's crazy. Okay. Damn, I should have waited to click record. All right. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Okay, last night I fell asleep, like, towards the very end. But we have finished the book already, so that's okay. Tonight, we got to get the book finished, so I'm good. I done ate, slept. Okay, so we are on day 4 of the ongoing teaching at Say Their Name Square. For anybody who's just tuning in now, or for anybody who is just retroactively going back and watching these videos, I'm gonna catch you up to what's happened so far. The first book that we read was The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. That was the first day of the ongoing teaching. The second book that we read was The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. And then the third book we read yesterday was They Can't Kill Us All by Wesley Bowery. And so what we're trying to do here is we're reading one book every day for the full 24 hours. In the midst of the day at 5 o'clock p.m. we have a group discussion about the book. And what we want to be doing is, as we're reading these books and getting a hold of this information and educating ourselves, we want to be cross-referencing how these things interrelate to the issues that we're facing in Rockford. We want to be thinking about how the issues that are raised in books that were written in 2010 or in 2000 or in 1990 or in 1980 interrelate to the issues that we face in 2021. And we want to figure out we want to contrast and compare. We want to contrast and compare the issues that's brought up in the End of Policing in general about specifically the issues that we face here in Rockford, Illinois. We want to contrast and compare the issues that's brought up in the New Jim Crow with specifically the issues that we face here in Rockford, Illinois. And so that's the same thing that we're doing as we're going through and reading Assata and autobiography. We have multiple people coming in and reading. We're going to have a graphic coming out next week for sign-ups. We're gonna have an email coming out next week for sign-ups, but come down here and sign up, and you can just come down here at any point in time and read. Again, we're doing this 24 hours, so at any point in time that you want to come down and participate, no matter what your reading caliber is, we want people to come out and read, and then we want you to get comfortable enough with reading that you can, in the midst of reading, express the thoughts that you have and express the ways in which you feel like you can cross-reference the things in the books compared to the things that we face in Rockford, Illinois. All right, so we are on chapter 13, page 195. Again, this is Assata and autobiography. We want to encourage everybody to purchase these books. And this table uneven, it's crazy. We want to encourage everybody to purchase these books online or get them on apps, and also, as the weeks progress here, we are going to build the May 30th Alliance Community Library, so come down here and get the books. If you are somebody who are more means or a more affluent means, as you see the books that we're reading and the list that we put in together, go out and purchase multiple copies of these books and bring these books out here, so that way more people can come out and get these books and read them and get this information. And as you read these books, we're going to re-upload all of these videos online too, so that way people can read some of these books, and instead of having to maybe listen to us read it, they can hear what it is that we expressed in the group messages. So we're going to put those in separate videos too. All right, we on page 195. I am at school when I hear about it. Electric shocks are zooming down my back the way they do when I am about to go temporarily insane. On the train, headed uptown, I am ready to riot. I'm having daymares on the subway, imagining myself with a long knife slashing slits in white sheets. Ku Klux Klan blood is spilling. You want to look like a ghost? You want to look like a ghost? My mind keeps chanting, you want to look like a ghost? Well, I'll make you one. Sitting on the subway, bloody fantasies. I look out of my daymare. Nobody is moving. Everybody screams. Everybody has a frozen face. The train is slowing down. Everybody is tensely looking at the door. 125th Street. I am going to a riot. I want to kill someone. Martin Luther King has been murdered. Oh, damn, that's crazy. That's crazy. It's the day Martin Luther King got murdered. Wow. The street wakes me up. There is no blood yet. Everybody is getting into position. The wind is blowing rumors. The people are waiting. The streets are rumbling. The tanks are coming. The natives are restless. The tanks will quiet the natives. The tanks are coming. I feel absurd and impotent. Who am I going to attack? Where is the George Lincoln Rockwell? I am ready to kill him. He will get a chance to utter exactly 2 syllables before I cut him off. He isn't there. Only the rumors and the rumble of the tanks and the waiting. The store windows are filled with shit. You can't exchange Martin Luther King for shit in the store window. Smashing windows will do me no good. I am beyond that. I want blood. The tanks are waiting to crush the resistance, squelch the disturbance. It crosses my mind. I want to win. I don't want to rebel. I want to win. The revolution will not be televised on the 6 o'clock news. I have to get myself ready. Revolution. The word has me going. I am back on the subway. Nobody is looking at anybody. I think I have my period. Sweat is rolling down my legs. I go home. My mother is glad to see me. She knows that I am half crazy. The television is wet with crocodile tears. Rebellion, rebellious children, temper tantrums, rebellion, revolution. I like the word. The Grim Reapers are abuzz. Reports about the natives. They are excited. This is the stuff that news is made of. We are looking at each other. Impassioned speeches sizzle on their tongues, causing sour ashes to fall from our mouths. We are just sitting here. I am thinking about revolution. The tonic, abstract, revolution. I'm tired of watching us lose. They kill our leaders, then they kill us for protesting. Protest, protest, revolution. If it exists, I want to find it. Bulletins, more bulletins. I'm tired of bulletins. I want bullets. While I was going to CCNY, after I graduated from Manhattan Community College, I decided to get married. My husband was politically conscious, intelligent, and decent, and our affair was frantic, high-pitched, and charged with emotion. Somehow, I believed that our shared commitment to the black liberation struggle would result in a marriage made in heaven. I spent most of my time in school, meetings, or demonstrations, and whenever I was at home, my head was usually stuck in some book. It was unthinkable to allow more than 5 minutes on mundane things like keeping house or washing dishes. To complicate matters, my husband's ideas about marriage stemmed mostly from his parents' life, where his mother was the homemaker and his father was the breadwinner. Spaghetti was about the only thing I could cook, and he was profoundly shocked to learn I had none of his mother's domestic skills. After a while, it became clear to me that I was about as ready to be married as I was to grow wings and fly. So after a confused and unhappy year, we decided we made much better friends than marriage partners and called it quits. I decided to go to California. It was becoming increasingly clear to me that, although it was important for students to participate in the struggle, no revolution had ever been won by students alone. Struggling around school issues had narrowed my perspective, and I was getting bogged down. I wanted to expand that struggle to the black community. At that time, California, especially the Bay Area, was where everything was happening. Some of my favorite professors were going out west for the summer, and they offered to hook me up with a place to stay. As usual, I was flat broke, but a good friend gave me the money to make the trip with a little spending change thrown in. My friends found a place for me in Berkeley, the most radical, progressive place I had ever been in. Revolutionary posters were plastered all over the walls, along with people's murals. The fronts of banks and other official buildings were bricked up as a result of the demonstrations and street fighting that followed the People's Park struggles. Red Stars and Miles' Red Book were sold on street corners, and food cooperatives sold health at a cheap price. People's collectives were dedicated to surviving, struggling, and teaching. I was impressed with the kinds of informal solutions they had cooked up to deal with their problems they faced, and I enrolled in the practical skill classes they gave, printing and laying out first aid, etc. There were books and pamphlets in the San Francisco and Berkeley bookstores I had never seen in New York, and for the first time I read the theory of urban guerrilla warfare as outlined by Che Guevara, Carlos Marighella, and the Tupamaros. I had been more aware of imperialism in Vietnam or Cambodia, and the extent of U.S. imperialism in South Central America surprised me. The U.S. government had invaded more than 15 countries there, not once or twice, but in some cases more than 10 times, and the guerrilla movements were waging around struggles in most of them. Reading about guerrilla warfare in South America and Vietnam was one thing, but thinking in terms of guerrilla warfare inside the U.S. was another. Back then, people used the word revolution just because it sounded heavy. Half the time what they were really talking about was change or some kind of vague progress. Some meant a separate black nation, and others dealt with black revolution as part of an overall revolution waged by whites, Hispanics, Orientals, Native Americans, and blacks. Malcolm said it meant bloodshed and land. To me, the revolutionary struggle of black people had to be against racism, capitalism, imperialism, and sexism, and for real freedom under a socialist government. But the reality of achieving it seemed a long way off. In Berkeley and San Francisco, the revolutions didn't seem too far away. A lot of white radicals, hippies, Chicanos, blacks, and Asians were ready to get down. But I hadn't forgotten the hard hats and the rednecks and the Bible Belt and the so-called middle Americans who had elected Nixon. I couldn't imagine the new left talking to those people, much less organizing them and changing their minds. I decided the only way I could come up with some answers was to keep on studying and struggling. I didn't know half of what I was studying would fit in. But I figured it would all come in handy someday. I read about guerrilla warfare and clandestine struggle without having the faintest idea that one day I would go underground. It's kind of funny when I think about it, because reading all that stuff probably has saved my life a million times. As part of my first aid skill class, I worked as an assistant to a doctor who volunteered once a week at Alcatraz. At the time, Alcatraz had been taken over by Native Americans who were protesting against a long series of broken treaties, genocidal policies, and racist exploitation. Alcatraz symbolized the strength and dignity of Indian people as well as their resolve to fight to preserve their cultural traditions. I enjoyed everything about going there except the trip. The doctor was a motorcycle fanatic who insisted on zooming across the Golden Gate Bridge on that thing, with me hanging on for dear life. Once on the other side, we would jump into a rickety little boat with water in the bottom and limp across the bay to the island. By the time we got there, I felt as if I had done a day's work. The first thing that hit me was the spirit of the people. I felt a tremendous pride, tremendous determination, and tremendous calm from the time I landed on the island until the time I left. They were Native Americans from all over North America, including Canada, from different tribes and backgrounds. They were young and old. Little babies wiggled in their mother's arms, and one old man who had spent many years in Alcatraz prison said that when he arrived on the island, he had taken a sledgehammer and reduced the cell he had once been locked in to rubble. The prison, one of the most infamous and sadistic ever to exist, loomed in the background. There were many different Indian nations, each with its own rich culture, religious traditions, history, and folklore. Everybody was into learning and teaching each other their own history and culture. It was a surprise to find out how many Native Americans have been raised in cities and knew nothing about who they were. In that respect, they were very similar to black people. Most of them were from the West Coast, and so I told them about the Indian Museum and the Museum of Natural History in New York. Suddenly, I stopped short. I wondered how I would feel going into some museum and seeing the houses and stolen artifacts of my people stuck away in some exhibition hall. As I spoke, I realized that most of the history I had been taught about the Indians was probably lies invented by the white man. It wasn't until later, for instance, that I learned that scalping was an old European custom. In the 1700s, the state of Massachusetts was paying the equivalent of $60 for a scalp, and Pennsylvania paid $134. It wasn't until more than 100 years later, in response to the massive genocide at the hands of whites, that the Indians themselves started scalping. None of the little museum exhibits featuring teepees and feather headdresses had ever mentioned how men, women, and children were mowed down at Wounded Knee, or how the U.S. Army had purposely given the Indians smallpox-infected blankets. As I listened to those sisters and brothers at Alcatraz, I realized that the true history of any oppressed people is impossible to find in history books. I will always be grateful for having had the opportunity to visit Alcatraz. I will never forget the quiet confidence of the Indians as they went on about their lives calmly, even though they were under the constant threat of invasion by the FBI and the U.S. military. They didn't fit into any of my preconceived notions or the stereotyped images shown on TV and in the movies. They were really open with me, and after a while, we talked about the struggle in general. They had many of the same problems we had: education, organizing the people to struggle, and raising consciousness. They damn sure had the same enemy, and they were doing as bad as we were, if not worse. They told me to check out Akawasani when I returned to New York. It was a territory they had liberated on the border between New York and Canada. I told them if they ever came to New York, they should visit me and check out Harlem. Sure. When are you going to liberate it? They asked. Okay, this is the first one. Okay, so two things. One of the main things that we want to be doing is taking time to cross-reference two things. We want to cross-reference the time frame in which these books are written in and how that connects and interrelates and is different or similar to the time frame in which we are in now, and then we want to be connecting the issues that are brought up in these books to the issues that we are facing in Rockford specifically. So that way, each thing that we are reading, we are actually taking something from and growing from. And so, first, I think that, man, I can't even, we weren't even supposed to read this book today. We were supposed to be reading Our Prison is Obsolete by Angela Davis. Unfortunately, it didn't come in the mail in a quick enough time. And so we switched books, and somebody had just dropped this book off. It was something that we had talked about reading, but we didn't have a 100% sure we was going to even read. And so we decided to read it. And the fact that somebody just came here, Antar just came here and reminded me that today was the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And it reminded me that last night when I was on Twitter, I seen that Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter tweeted that this was the day that her father gave the infamous speech, I've been to the mountaintop, which in my opinion is, I think, probably my favorite speech. Is that in the letter from Birmingham are like my favorite pieces of my favorite things to listen to back from Martin Luther King Jr. And so as I'm going through and I'm reading this first paragraph on chapter 13, and she's speaking about the emotions that she has, I'm figuring that something must have happened. I'm thinking that maybe it was, I'm trying to figure out if it's a Detroit riot. I'm just trying to figure out what it is. I'm knowing that if she's angry, that it's probably around some type of, it's a very specific emotion that in my opinion, a very specific emotion that Black people have when they feel like one of theirs has been murdered, and it's due to, and they can see directly the root causes of the society that led to the murder. Emmett Till is a very specific thing. I've watched, it was this TV show that just came out, Lovecraft Country. And one of the episodes at the beginning, the show is based in Chicago, and at the beginning of the show, I just see like a big funeral, and they got like, I know what the time frame is like, and I see a big funeral in Chicago, and I hear a few people talking, and off back, I already know like it's Emmett Till funeral, because the emotion is so familiar. The same thing, I watched this TV show, Watchmen, and it covers some of the Tulsa riots, and the emotion is so familiar. When Trayvon Martin, when these things happen, these emotions are so familiar, and it's never been enough time for any type of true healing to happen in between these lynchings and these murders that are state sanctioned, or some type of vigilantism, and then at the same time we're still dealing with inner community violence because of these same kind of root causes. So this violence is manifesting itself in different ways, and so each time one of these things happen, it's like this ripple effect. And so as I'm reading this, before I get to the line where it says Martin Luther King has been murdered, I start thinking about this first paragraph is exactly how people might feel in about 3 weeks if Derek Chauvin is found innocent. This exact paragraph, this first paragraph in here, I mean this whole thing entirety, but that is how Black people in this country will feel if Derek Chauvin is acquitted, because it'll be Martin Luther King being assassinated again, Malcolm X being assassinated again, Trayvon Martin and Emmett Till, and each one of these things happening over and over again, and each one of these names on these memorials happening over and over again. And so then to get to the line where she says Martin Luther King has been murdered, on the anniversary of when Martin Luther King was murdered on this same day, the power that's in that. And then reading the reaction to it, reading and seeing her talking about the tanks, and that could be Ferguson in the book They Can't Kill Us All that we just read. Or that could be Minneapolis last year on the news. Might even be Minneapolis in a month. Might be Chicago, might be Rockford in a month. In Chicago, a 13-year-old boy was just shot and killed, and people are asking for the body cam video footage to be put out. What happens when that body cam video footage gets put out and you see the truth? Because if the young man would have shot at the police, the video will be out. They use the word armed confrontation. So that means that the police officer may have thought he had a gun or thought he seen a gun, but he shot him without any type of shots being fired at him or with any type of harm being initiated or possibly being done to him. This is how people gonna feel, whether they understand it or not, but this is how people gonna feel when that video comes out and they see Dominic McNeese attempting to murder Tyrus Jones, no matter where they may stand on it now. When they see that video and it becomes a reminder of the fact that of state-sanctioned violence, and when it becomes a reminder that that these things are deeper than some of these leaders and some of these politicians are willing to speak about and willing to peel back layers on. And so that's and this emotion that she's speaking about, when she's speaking about being past rioting, being past looting, and talking about bullets and blood. It was a generation. We were just speaking about this as we was talking about what happened to her and how it connects to some of these other books. But as I go back and I look at certain things, it was a generation that came of black people that watched the SCLC march and be beat and be assaulted, that watched some of these other organizations and some of these other leaders. You know what it's like to watch somebody like Martin Luther King Jr., who was preaching nonviolence, who was preaching to love your enemy, and is preaching compassion, and is preaching all of these things. To see him be murdered, to see him be killed, to know that even this is not enough, even this is too much. Not because of the manner in which he was going about doing it, but because of who he was doing it for and where he was doing it at. And then even I grew up in a time where I was told, regularly, Malcolm X was killed. That was one of the things. Malcolm X was killed by black people. You have to have a conversation with somebody who will really sit down with you and explain the depths of, COINTELPRO and all of these things, But we live in a time where just a year ago they're putting out information and they're saying, yes, that the FBI was behind the assassination of Malcolm X. So all of these different leaders who didn't get to live to be full lives. We talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X as if these men lived to be 70, 80 years old, 90 years old. These men, neither one of those men lived to be 40. Neither one of those men lived to see any of their children graduate high school. And so when I read that paragraph and that passion, I feel all of those things. And then when we go past that and we start reading about, she starts reading about her experience in Alcatraz and her experience with the indigenous folks that were in Alcatraz. That just brings me back to to the new Jim Crow at the beginning, when Michelle Alexander was talking about finding forms of intersectionality. And in the new Jim Crow, she talked about the intersectionality between mass incarceration and mass deportation, and that is the connection between us as a black community and our and black people do, and black people also deal with mass deportation. It is black people from Africa and black people from other countries who also deal with deportation at a high rate. But right now, in the interest of speaking about the intersectionality, that connects us as the mass deportation and the mass incarceration is two issues. Gives us intersectionality between black people and brown people, between the descendants of slaves, and between the people who had their land stolen in the South in Mexico. And so we need those forms of intersectionality and to understand each other's history, so that way we can form popular fronts and struggle together. That young man who was killed in Chicago, the 13-year-old, I believe that he is of Latino descent. We deal with these same issues. We can't afford to not understand that we deal with these same issues. And so that's a form of intersectionality that's brought up here. And then here in Assata's autobiography, she's bringing up a form of intersectionality. Her and the indigenous people are learning which struggles that they have similarly. The indigenous people are speaking to her about the forms in which they've struggled and what that should look like for black people. When she tells them to visit Harlem, she asks, they respond to her, when are they going to liberate Harlem? Which is a real thing. Think about that. I remember when the protest happened down in Atlanta. I remember T.I. and Killer Mike coming out and saying that the city in Atlanta, that they should stay in, and that Atlanta was Wakanda, and that they don't need to do that there, and they shouldn't do that here. But Atlanta is not liberated. You seen what happened when they went out and protested. It was videos of, I remember one of the most infamous videos, somebody got their tires slit in their car, they pulled the man and the woman out of their car and tased them. The cops who did it ended up getting fired. In Atlanta, they shot that young man on video because he grabbed the taser and ran in front of that Wendy's or whatever. This was all after T.I. and Killer Mike came out and said that this was Wakanda, that this was not to do certain things here because Atlanta was different. So just having a higher percentage of black people in a place, or just having more black money in a place, doesn't negate the fact that the police department, that institutions of the state can still be working to oppress and exploit black people. And so they understood that as indigenous people. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, I think indigenous people understand that more is because of the extent to which the genocide has happened to them. Their land has been taken all the way away from them. The population has been decreased to such a small percentage that, you know, they've given them that, you know, Elijah Muhammad was talking about the Nation of Islam having pieces, one of the piece of land that was just for black people. Indigenous folks have gotten that, but it's because of how deep the genocide was and how deep the destruction to those people were. And so that's also a front that's also a form of intersectionality that we must have as black people. We must understand the history of what happened to the indigenous people here to make sure it don't happen to us. And then in that connection, now that's right there, that connects us to the indigenous people and connects us to Latino and Latina people. Right there, those are forms of intersectionality. And that's how minorities cease to be minorities and become majorities. And that's how people who are oppressed cease to be oppressed and start getting some type of equitability. One of the things Martin Luther King said in that speech that he gave on the day before he was assassinated was that one of Pharaoh's best ways of keeping the slaves in enslavement was keeping the slaves fighting amongst themselves, was keeping the slaves divided, because he knew that the second that the slaves got together, that was the beginning of the end of slavery. And that's true. That's 100% true. Okay, where we at? We on page 199. There were a million groups in the Bay Area I wanted to check out. There was so much activity I would have had to spend 28 hours a day just to keep up with it all. Someone I was studying with arranged for me to hook up with Brown Berets, a Chicano group that had been started recently in California and Texas. It was a brief meeting since the brother with whom I had the appointment had to be on the move. He ran down to me some of the conditions they were dealing with and some of the work they were doing. I had always thought of the Chicano movement as a rural rather than an urban one. Most of the information we had received was about the Chicano farm workers' struggle and people like Cesar Chavez fighting to organize them and abolish the unbearable living conditions and slave wages they were first forced to work for. I was not aware that Chicanos in the city were fighting against unemployment, police brutality, and inferior schools, just like black people. In the same way that the Black Panther Party was trying to organize and politicize street gangs in Chicago, the Brown Berets wanted to politicize Chicano street gangs in Los Angeles. The brother also told me that they have been doing a lot of work around Los Sierra de la Razas, 7 Chicano brothers who have been accused of killing a San Francisco policeman. They were later acquitted. I wanted to rap some more about this case because I was seeing the same pattern everywhere, sisters and brothers being locked up all over the country, accused of killing pigs or of conspiring to. The brother had to run though. We promised that we would hook up again, but it never happened. Next, I wanted to check out the Red Guard, a group of young revolutionary brothers and sisters who were struggling in Chinatown, San Francisco. I was especially anxious to meet up with them because it was so hard to get information about them back east. The West Coast has the largest Asian population in the country, and I really wanted to get a good idea about what was going on in the Asian communities. A lot of people think Asians do not experience racism, that they are professionals and business owners, unaware that many are poor and oppressed. Finding the Red Guard was not at all easy. Half the people I ran into never had heard of them, and the other half only had a minimal knowledge of who they were and what they were all about. Someone gave me an address, and since I didn't have the faintest idea where it was, I got a brother to drive me over to Chinatown to look for their headquarters. We ended up getting lost and never did find the address. Instead, we ended up eating at a Chinese restaurant and getting into a big debate. He couldn't understand why a black woman wanted to hook up with Chinese revolutionaries in the first place. Ain't nobody gonna free black folks but black folks. Those Chinese don't give a damn about you and me. All they care about is their own people and what's going on in China. I told him that I thought there were a whole lot of us in the same predicament and that the only way we were going to get out of it was to come together and break the chains. The brother looked at me as if I was spouting empty rhetoric. Some of the laws of revolution are so simple they seem impossible. People think that in order for something to work, it has to be complicated. But a lot of the times, the opposite is true. We usually reach success by putting the simple truths that we know into practice. The basis of any struggle is a people coming together to fight against the common enemy. When I finally did get around to meeting some brothers from the Red Guard, it was quite by accident and somewhat embarrassing. I was hanging out in the park with the sister and some brothers from the Black Students Union. We were exchanging experiences, talking politics, and smoking reefer. The day was blue and beautiful, and we just sat there lazing in the sun without a care in the world, listening to some rock music that was playing in the background. I had brought a whole pile of leaflets and newspapers from New York to give them. Everybody was feeling laid back and mellow when all of a sudden a bunch of pigs descended on the group and started hitting them with clubs. We were all so high, we just sat there watching, like it was a movie or something. By the time we got our voices together to cry out and protest, the pigs were carrying the hippies off. Two Asian brothers came up to us and pointed to the newspapers. "You better get rid of those before the pigs see them," one said. "More are on the way. If you got any grass on you, you better get out of here fast." We were a picture of confusion, stuffing sheets of paper under shirts and in the pocketbooks. The Asian brother led our half-day's procession out of the park. "You need a lift?" "Yeah, that's cool." "To where?" "Oh, anywhere. Anywhere from here," one of us answered. We were too high to make any decisions. We piled into a rickety-looking Jeep. They told us they would drive us to the Shattuck Street and drop us off. And we were driving, everybody started to talk. And as we were driving, everybody started to talk about the pigs beating up on the hippies. The image was burning in everyone's mind. "That was a trip," drawled one of the BSU brothers. "Did you see those pigs? I thought they were going to kill those dudes." I was still high, feeling too stunned and eerie to talk. "That's why we need a revolution," the sister was saying. "They just think they can do anything they want to." "What started the shit?" somebody asked the Asian brothers. "It was some of the hassle about some ID or something. They just wanted to hassle somebody. You lucky they didn't see you first." We were all silent for a minute, imagining ourselves being beaten and carted off to jail. "It's a good thing they didn't see those leaflets," the other Asian brother said. "They would have hassled you for sure." The sister, who was obviously angry, got off into a political rap. Everybody kind of jumped into the conversation, talking about the situation in the black community, the black student struggle, and the overall piggishness of America. Everybody was into the rap, all of us presenting ourselves as political activists and revolutionaries. "Are you guys in a movement?" one of the Asian brothers asked us. Everybody jumped at the opportunity to say yes, giving credentials and naming organizations. "Right on," they said. They told us they were the Red Guard cadre and that they were having some kind of forum on a revolution in China. In my tongue-tied, confused state of marijuana intoxication, I tried to communicate to them that I had been trying to get in touch with their organization to check it out. The brother who had been doing most of the talking reached down under the seat and handed me a leaflet which had the date and time of the forum. "Make sure you come and check us out," he said. "Put this somewhere you won't lose it," making direct reference to my confused, disjointed state of consciousness. "You guys should really be careful with that grass, especially when you've got leaflets or newspapers on you. A lot of good comrades have been busted like that." "Yeah," said the other one. "You've got to be alert to deal with this situation. You've got to be disciplined and ready to deal with the enemy at all times." The Red Guard brothers dropped us off and we thanked them and said goodbyes amid a hail of right-ons and power to the people. Careful avoiding each other's eyes, we wandered aimlessly, looking for some place where we could plop down and get our heads together. I was feeling guilty and stupid, silly and politically backward. I was embarrassed to be bumbling down the street in the middle of the day, not in full control of my faculties, too high to deal with reality, much less change it. I wondered what the brothers from the Red Guard had thought of us, sitting there in a stupor, having to be virtually led out of the park. It was obvious my stuff was raggedy and that I needed to get my act together. If I wanted to call myself a revolutionary, I was going to have to earn the title. I had heard somebody say that revolutionaries get high on revolution and that it was the best high in the world. "I'm going to check out that high," I said aloud. "Huh? What did you say?" "Nothing," I answered. I was just talking out loud. "Oh," somebody said, "I can dig it." We stopped off at a coffee shop and had some tea. Everybody looked sheepish and lost in their own thoughts. Finally, we waved our goodbyes and made our separate ways. I walked back to where I was staying, wondering what I was going to have to do to become who I needed to become. Revolution is about change, revolution is about change, and the first place the change begins is in yourself. Okay, so again, multiple things within that one that sort of stood out to me. I think the first thing I think I'd be remiss to not say is they're talking about somebody getting beat up in 1970, 1960 something. And we got pictures of Denzel all around this park, and Denzel got his ass beat. You know, those is his words. You know, first words, they beat the fuck out of me, Judge. He got the fuck beat out of him. This is 40 plus years later, and these things are still happening. And I think one of the main differences is back then, some things like Rodney King couldn't happen because video camera access wasn't as easily possible. Videos like George Floyd couldn't happen because video access, camera phones weren't as easily possible. But these things have been happening. So imagine being those people who seen this happening and wanting to go to like the news outlets or the media outlets or to some reporters or maybe let's say even they want to go to the police. And now it's just their word against the police word, and it's nothing that can be done. On May 30th, we seen the exact thing that they're talking about happen. We seen that thing take place on May 30th regularly, over and over again, captured on video, seen by hundreds of witnesses, and we seen that nothing happened from it. We seen no justice was given from it. And the reason that we're in a place now where we're dealing with this is because back then, these things happened and were just normal. It was just okay. It was, it was just run of the mill. And so that's how deep this is. This is 40, 50 years we're talking about right now of police brutality in the form of just assaulting and then arresting somebody. So it's no way that we're going to just in 10 months or even in a year or even in 5, 10 years think that this problem is going to be fixed. So we can't be, once we understand how deep this issue is and how far back this issue goes, we start to understand that we cannot be discouraged because we haven't fixed it in 10 months. We cannot be discouraged because we haven't fixed it in 2 years or in 3 years. We can't be discouraged when we do something and we have an event and it's 5 people or it's 10 people, or we have a march and it's not as many people as we would like it to be. We have to understand how deep these issues are and how psychologically driven in police violence is and state sanctioned violence is, and and how run of the mill it is, and how little justice has ever been given to people who have dealt with that type of violence. So that's the first thing that sticks out to me as I'm reading this and listen to them describe someone be assaulted by police and arrested. I'm thinking about Denzel being assaulted. I'm thinking about the people on May 30th being assaulted. Thinking about people at Back to Blue being assaulted and how these issues are still here. And then also back to what we were just speaking about when we brought up the new Jim Crow and how this can connect to the new Jim Crow and then connect to issues that we face here now and the ideology and tactics that we need to be forming in the here and now. She's talking about forms of intersectionality. She's talking about going out of her way to find out about the Chicano struggle. She's talking about going out of her way to find out about the Asian American struggle. And that brings us, again, full circle. Just in Atlanta, I don't know, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a man went and did a hate crime, mass shooting where he murdered Asian folks, Asian American folks, specifically because of their ethnicity, because of their color. So their struggle is real, but then the disconnect is there too. I've seen black people talk. I've seen, again, let me not do generalizations. I've seen segments of the black community speaking about how Asians have not been united with black people in their struggles, or Asians have not been for black liberation, or how we don't need to focus on the Asians right now. We need to focus on black liberation or black struggles right now. And I think that what we have to start doing is understanding that these things have, now that we can see things like social media and we can see how specific things become used as tools for divisiveness and to divide and conquer, we have to start understanding that we have more commonalities as minorities and oppressed groups than we have differences. And so we cannot allow our differences to be roadblocks. We cannot allow one section of Asian America that may be racist and discriminatory against blacks to alienate us from Asian America as a whole and from the history of struggles in Asian America as a whole. The same thing for the Hispanic community or Latina community. We cannot just, of course, no matter what community you go to, there are going to be people who are racist and discriminatory against black people. That is how deep the stigma of black skin and of dark skin and of Africans are. That is how, but that also goes to tell you about how powerful we are. That every culture we've touched, they got a word for nigga in every culture, or some kind of discriminatory slur for black people in every culture. But that's because of that's power that's in that. You know what I'm saying? So we cannot allow. I just say that to say we cannot allow bigots in specific communities to alienate us from the community as a whole. When we can find traces of ourselves in those communities. So it's power with us uniting with Asian Americans in 2021 to fight common oppression. It's powering us, uniting with people from the Latina community, and finding commonalities. And so that's, again, another form of intersectionality that she brings up. So just like that, all of these things can be cross-referenced back, and reading one book turns into reading 10, 15 books at once. Okay, let's pick back up where we was at. All right, we on page 203. The most important organization on my list to check out was the Black Panther Party headquarters in Oakland. I had a whole lot of respect for the party and have been heavily influenced by it, as had almost everyone around my age that I knew. Every time we heard about Huey Newton and Bobby Seale standing up to the power structure, we slapped five and said, yeah. As far as I was concerned, the Panthers were bad. The party was more than bad. It was bodacious. The sheer audacity of walking onto the California Senate floor with rifles, demanding that black people have the right to bear arms and the right to self-defense, made me sit back and take a long look at them. And the more political I became, the more I appreciated them. Panthers didn't try to sound all intellectual, talking about the national bourgeois, the military-industrial complex, the reactionary ruling class. They simply called a pig a pig. They didn't refer to the repressive domestic army or the state repressive apparatus. They called the racist police pigs and racist dogs. One of the most important things that the party did was to make it really clear who the enemy was. Not the white people, but the capitalistic, imperialistic oppressors. They took the black liberation struggle out of a national context and put it in an international context. The party supported revolutionary struggles in the governments all over the world and insisted the U.S. get out of Africa, out of Asia, out of Latin America, and out of the ghetto too. I had gotten to know some of the Panthers in New York when they spoke at the lectures we invited them to. At Manhattan Community College. I made it my business to drop by some of the New York Black Panther Party offices and offer them to help them with this or that, whatever needed to be done. I was happy to do it. I barely opened my mouth. I just looked, listened, and worked. Some of the comrades would ask why I didn't join. I probably will someday, I'd always answer. When I heard on the radio that the New York Panthers had been busted, I was furious. The so-called conspiracy charges were so stupid that even a fool could see through them. The police had actually had the audacity to charge them with plotting to blow up the flowers in the botanical garden. And the 21 were some of the baddest, most politically educated sisters and brothers in the party. It was an insult. I thought about joining the party right then, but I had some other things I wanted to do and I needed a low profile in order to do them. As much as I dug the party, I also had some real differences with this style of work. As I opened the front gate of the Oakland headquarters, I felt just as nervous about going inside as I did about the Doberman pinchers running around the yard. A brother opened the door and I nervously blurted out that I was from New York and had come to check out the party. He acted like he was glad to see me, brought me into a room to meet some of the other Panthers. A group of sisters and brothers were sitting around the room, laughing and talking. They greeted me casually, passing over a chair for me to sit in. Artie Seal was there and I had to control myself to keep from gawking at her. I wondered how she felt with her husband in jail, being railroaded and bound and gagged in court. I recognized the names of others. It was strange to be there in a room with these people. It was like sitting down on the pages of a history book. They asked me about New York, and I told them that what was happening with the black students at Manhattan Community College, CCNY, and the black student movement in general, the anti-war movement, black construction workers, and whatever other work I was involved in at the time. I told them I had done some work for the New York Panthers and ran off a list of the ones I knew. Somebody asked me why I had never joined the party. Half stammering, I told them I had thought about it but had decided not to. Why? Everybody wanted to know. It was hard for me to say it was because I felt so much love and respect for the sisters and brothers seated there, but I knew I hate myself if I didn't say what was on my mind. That I had been turned off by the way the spokesman for the party talked to people, that their attitude had often been arrogant, flippant, and disrespectful. I told them I preferred the polite and respectful manner in which civil rights workers and black Muslims talk to the people, rather than the arrogant, fuck you style that was too popular in New York. I said they cursed too much and turned off a lot of black people who would otherwise be responsive to what the party was saying. When I had finished, I waited nervously, fully expecting them to jump all over what I had said. To my profound surprise, nobody did. Everybody agreed that if that was, in fact, how party members were related to the people, they should change it once. One of the sisters pointed out that there was a leadership crisis in the New York chapter caused by the arrest and imprisonment of the Panther 21. It was well known by everybody in the movement that the New York police had kidnapped the most experienced, able, and intelligent leaders of the New York branch and demanded $100,000 ransom for each one. One of the brothers explained that the Panthers were facing the same problem all over the country because of persecution by the pigs. We spent the rest of the afternoon rapping about the black struggle in New York and in the U.S. in general. I was deep in a discussion about strategy and tactics when Emory Douglas came in. I was as happy as a bee in a pollen factory to meet him. I dug his artwork a lot and had even taped a piece he had written on our revolutionary art to my closet door. We hit it off at once, and when everybody finished rapping, he took me up to see how the Black Panther newspaper was put together. I was truly impressed by the Panthers in Oakland. After my first visit, I dropped in at their office regularly. I visited some of the other branches in the area, talking to the people and asking my usual ton of questions. I spent a couple of nights working at the distribution center for the party paper, which was located in Fulton District in San Francisco. It was a trip. The papers wouldn't get picked up from the printer until late in the evening, and people were working to the wee hours sorting them out and preparing them for the distribution to the Panther offices all around the country. Panthers worked there, but the majority seemed to be sisters and brothers from the neighborhood who had just dropped in to give the Panthers a hand. A lot of young people were there and some elderly sisters and brothers. As we wrapped the papers in bundles, printed addresses, and counted out papers, we sang Panther songs and marching chants. Every now and then, a few stepped outside to sip a little bit of dog. This was supposedly a Panther intervention made of red port and lemon juice. It wasn't too bad once I got used to it, and by the time 1 a.m. came around, I loved it. Working on the paper distribution didn't even seem like work. It was more like a party. Somebody always gave me a lift home, and I would fall into a happy sleep, feeling refreshed and renewed. Okay, we watched a documentary down here about the Black Panthers that I hope we can get into, maybe even have a week, a whole Black Panther week out here as the spring and the summer comes around, and we can delve deeper into that. But I think what I take away from this, again, cross-referencing, this time not the new Jim Crow or the end of policing, but they can't kill us all. And in here, she's talking about her ideological differences with the New York Panther Party, and the reason in which she didn't join and why, other people she feel like didn't join. And one of the things that They Can't Kill Us All dissected, while it was dissecting the state-sanctioned violence and the 21st century lynchings of Michael Brown and Freddie Gray and Sandra Bland, and what happened in Charleston. It also dissected the organizations that were coming together around these tragedies, and that were coming together to try to get justice for communities around these tragedies, and how sometimes they had ideological differences that inhibited them from getting some of the things that they wanted. Sometimes they had differences with which people were leaders and which people weren't. And then also that makes me, when they speak about the New York 21 or the Panther 21 in here, that makes me think about what we spoke about the political policing that took place in here, and the motivations and the reasons for the political policing. And you see how they strategically took out 21 people, and how the Panthers in Oakland were saying those 21 people were the most intelligent and the most understanding of the manners in which to gauge the struggle. So you can see how the political policing that you read about in the end of policing connects with this, and then you can also see how the ideological issues that organizations and communities had, and They Can't Kill Us All, connects into this. And so that gives us a picture for how we need to do things going forward. It's important to understand, and I think it's important to ideology is a very important thing, is a very real thing. People's belief systems, people's prejudices or biases is a very real thing. And as we are putting these things, as we are trying to organize the community and mobilize the community, we have to understand the community and understand the culture and the nature of the community. There was gunshots earlier.
I heard something.
No, yeah, I could hear it as I was talking. I just was, man. But yeah, that takes us, back, that takes us to the same, back to the organizational thing that we were speaking on. Back to the organizational thing that we were speaking on. I think it's important for us we have to understand how to organize and how to mobilize. And I'm not saying I have the answers to those things. I'm saying that that's something that we have to start questioning and thinking about. Let's use it, for example, what we've done for these past 4 days here. Because I think that we have to always be critically thinking about things. So we want to interact with as many people, inform as many people, educate as many people as possible. At the same time, we want to do it in the most efficient way and in the best way as possible. So with anything in life, you have to have pros and cons. You have to have lessons that you learn in anything. So would we have had more people interact and engage this first weekend? Yes. Is it the people's fault that they were not here? No. What we have to do is we have to figure out, okay, what things can we do differently to get the people to be here, to get the people to hear the message and to get the message to them, not be in a position of anger, of upsetness, or of frustration, or be in a position of being upset at the people because the people not coming along at the rate in which you would like the people to come along. And so in my opinion, the same thing when people have ideological differences. We have to be in a place where someone coming to you and presenting, and again, these are some of my beliefs. Someone coming to you and they have a difference in ideology from you should not get you to a point where you have an argument with them, or you have a fight with them, or you start have a cussing match or a yelling match with them. If somebody has an ideological difference from you, but they've come to you whether they've come to you in a sense where maybe they don't subconsciously understand it or not, but if they've come to you to express that ideological difference, then they're prepared to be engaged in some form of a conversation. And maybe this may be the first step in them seeing something differently. And if you don't have the patience to present it to them the proper way, you may push them a step further away from understanding these issues than pushing them a step closer to understanding these issues. And so I agree. Hold on, it's Saturday nights, man. It's too damn loud out here. So I agree. We have to figure out ways. Okay, it's a car. When I heard a motorcycle, I feel like I know what kind of car coming. So we have to figure out a way to meet the people where they at, And I don't think meeting the people where they at is criticizing the people, And so I agree with her 100%. That turns me off too. That would turn me off too. It's why I do my best. And I know that this, comes off differently in different lives and at different times. I am emotional and I am passionate when I'm basically speaking to myself. Not speaking to myself. Speaking by myself. Speaking for myself. Not in dialogue and monologue. In monologue, yes, I'll be passionate. Yes, I'll be critical of things. I'll be critical of myself, passionate about things I should be doing differently in myself. But in the midst of dialogue, I want to build a bridge. I want to be able to empathize. I want to be able to understand. And I want to do that with the people. I want to have those dialogues with maybe the people who may be the furthest away from how I'm thinking, or the furthest away from where I need to get to. I probably have a very small amount of family members who think it's a good idea to abolish the police, who think it's a good idea to abolish prison. If them being far away from me ideologically means that I'm going to never talk to them and just argue with them when they don't understand it, I'll never get to the place of them being along for abolishing police or abolishing prison. But if I'm understand and empathize that I once did not believe this way, I once did not think this way, and I understand that it took specific things to happen to me to get to this place, then I understand it will also take specific things to happen to them and specific things to be presented to them for them to get to this place. And so it becomes my job not to try to force them to do my way or the highway, or force them to be my type of revolutionary, or force them to wage my type of struggle. It becomes my job to try to organize folks around us, around the struggle. Try to organize them, and then we can figure out the ideology and the tactics. We can figure out the tactics differently. We may not do we both believe that young black boys should not be being overly imprisoned more for crack cocaine than powder cocaine? Do we agree that mass incarceration is an issue for young black boys? Do we agree that we want police officers to stop shooting down our sons and daughters in the streets? Okay, we can organize around those things. Let's organize around those things. And as we are organizing around those things, I'll try to inform you about how prison abolition will help to rid us of that. How police abolition will help to rid us of that. It's a stigmatization around the concept of defunding the police. You don't get rid of stigmatization by yelling and criticizing everybody who has been institutionalized into the stigmatization. You get rid of the stigmatization by having conversations and showing them the faults and the things that they were the misconceptions that they had about these things. And so that's off on a tangent. But those are all the things that I get from that. When I hear her speak about how she was turned off by the leadership or by the people that she interacted with in the party, that makes me think about, I have been times where somebody's spoken to me and they've said that the attitude or the way certain people at certain demonstrations were speaking and acting turned them off, and it made them not be able to hear the message. And I'm in a place where I do understand that. I disagree with it? Yes. It don't matter, the same thing. It don't matter what you saying, what kind of words or language is being used or mannerisms are being used. Police violence is police violence. The person that I done seen somebody in a fast food get cussed all the way the hell out in McDonald's. The cashier ain't jump over the register and beat them up. And if they did, they'd be fired and they go to jail. So even though I can understand you not liking certain language, or I can understand you not liking certain mannerisms, or you disagreeing with certain ideologies, but we have to understand that the root issue is the main thing we have to prioritize. Okay.
You know what?
Yeah.
That 21, they took this 21 leadership.
Yeah.
They probably put their own leaders
Inside.
That.
That type of tension. What
That's the first thing I think.
When you say that, okay. So what anti?
Like you a op, or you trying to turn people off from
Right.
coming around. That's
Right.
op stuff.
Yeah.
Trying to purposely want people to be turned.
William O'Neill type stuff.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, what Antar was just saying is that he thinks the first thing that he thinks of when he hears that is he thinks that if they removed the 21, that they put in their own leadership there that was purposely trying to turn people away, that was purposely doing things that would negate people's desire to organize and to mobilize and to struggle in New York, which is a very real thing. Again, and that gives us him stating that that brings us to the end of policing and the political policing that we spoke about. And that's why I think the group discussions are important, because how I can read that and think about organizing issues and internal issues with groups and things like that, and hearing Antar speak about how he hears that and he thinks about state sanctioned deception, and he hears that and he thinks about political policing, and both of those things are very true. And we can't, and that's why cross references are important. That's why having discussions and conversations are important, because whether they did that in the Panther 21 or not, they did that with somebody. They did that somewhere where they removed the leadership and put their own people in. William O'Neill, in that movie, part of the time, he rose up the leadership because Fred was in jail and different people was going to jail and being killed. So, that is a fact. The context in which it fit in does not matter. Factually, that is something that has happened. So then, with Antar stating that, and this is important, why the group discussions is important, from him stating that gets me to the place where I think that, okay, so then we have to also be aware of that. We have to also think about that when you interact with somebody who is, just because they're black or just because they're maybe they're white, but they're at protests and at demonstrations, that does not mean that they are genuinely there for the same reasons you are there. That does not mean that they have not been are not some type of agent provocateurs, because that is a very real thing. When you start to successfully begin to liberate people and to successfully organize people, they will send in somebody to sabotage that. They will send in somebody to cause some type of infighting or disruption. So that's something that we have to also be aware of and be understanding of. As we move forward with the spring and the summer, and even going forward in the future with trying to liberate our brothers and sisters in Rockford and in Illinois and in the nation in whole. Those certain tactics will be deployed. Just like anybody who was constantly going to protests and demonstrations last year, if they thought that it was going to be successful and they wanted something from it, they should have understood that at some point they will try to arrest us. At some point they will try to assault us. At some point they will try to use psychological warfare on us. At some point they will follow and harass us. At some point they will try to use media manipulation to paint a narrative of the type of character that you have. They'll try to make you lose employment and deal with financial ruin. These are all things that will happen if you are successfully doing what you are doing. The times when those things don't happen is when you're not successfully doing it. Those are benchmarkers. Those are not things that should be limiting you or scaring you or deterring you. Those are benchmarkers. That means that you are getting closer. The fact that they wasn't arresting people at other protests in Rockford, and then last summer they started arresting people, that means that the needle was being pushed. That leverage is being exerted. Okay, let's see. All right, let's see. Okay, we're on page 204. Okay, no, we're on page 205, excuse me. It was splashed across It was splashed across the papers, blaring on the radio, and yet I still couldn't believe it. The face of the serious young man with the gun refused to leave my thoughts. I must have picked up the same newspaper and put it down 100 times. This shit was serious. 17 years old with the rifle under his raincoat. 17 years old and taking freedom into his own hands. 17 years old and defying the whole pig power structure in America. 17 years old and dead. Tears I didn't even know I had poured out. I got on the phone to find somebody who could explain it all. Who was Jonathan Jackson? Who was the young man who came to free a revolutionary black prisoner holding the district attorney and a pig judge hostage, shouting, "We are the revolutionaries. Free the Soledad brothers by 12:30. Who was he? I had only vaguely heard of the Soledad brothers. A brother who knew all about the case broke it down to me. 3 unarmed black prisoners were shot down in the yard by a white guard. A grand jury ruled it justifiable homicide. After the verdict, a white guard was found dead. 3 politically conscious black prisoners were charged with the murder and thrown into solitary. They all faced the death penalty. John Clutchett, Fleeta Drungo, and George Jackson were the brothers charged with the murder. George Jackson, a brilliant revolutionary theorist and writer, was Jonathan Jackson's brother. I couldn't get the whole thing out of my head. Why were grown men and women living while Jonathan Jackson lay dead? What kind of rage, what kind of oppression, and what kind of country shaped that young man? I felt guilty for being alive and well. Where was my gun, and where was my courage? I was dry-eyed when I attended the funeral. There were hundreds of people. We could barely get into the church. They set up a loudspeaker outside so that the people could hear the sermon. Black Panthers, solemn and determined, marched in military formation. I was so glad they were there. Black people need someone to stand up for us when we will always be. Black people need someone to stand up for us, or we will always be victims. I held my arms real close to me, feeling a bit unraveled. Life for us gets so ugly. If I stay a victim, it will kill me, I thought. It was time for me to get my shit together. I wanted to be one of the people who stood up. These were serious times. Angela Davis was running for her life. They had hooked her up with Jonathan Jackson, charged her with kidnapping and murder at the courthouse, even though she was nowhere on the set. They charged her with murder because they claimed that some of the guns used belonged to her. She was one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen. Not physically, but spiritually. I knew who she was because I had been keeping clippings of her in my file. She was the sister who got fired from her job teaching at a California college because she told everybody she was a communist, and if they didn't like it, they could go to hell. But I wasn't surprised. They would charge black people with anything, use any flimsy excuse. We were very glad they hadn't caught her. I hope they never would. The air was charged, everything was happening so fast, and I wasn't blind anymore. I was seeing things straight, seeing them more clearly than ever before. I had so many things to do. If you are deaf, dumb, and blind to what's happening in the world, you're under no obligation to do anything. But if you know what's happening and you don't do anything but sit on your ass, then you nothing but a punk.
Hey, bro, pardon the buddy.
Yeah.
Can you please read that line again?
Which line? Which line you want?
That's what I be telling everybody. I need you to read that line again.
Okay, I got you. Okay. If you are deaf, dumb, and blind to what's happening in the world, you're under no obligation to do anything. But if you know what's happening and you don't do anything but sit on your ass, then you're nothing but a punk. I tried to explain how I felt to some of the people that I knew I wanted to struggle on a full-time basis. They urged me to join the Panther Party. I went over in my mind all the criticisms I had of the party. They had said, you'll be good for the party and the party will be good for you. The party is only as strong as its people. It made a lot of sense to me. For the first time in months, I felt calm and sure of what I was going to do. I told them that the first thing I was going to do when I returned to New York was join the party. I thought about it all the way home. Of all the things I had wanted to do, all the things I had wanted to be when I was a little girl, a revolutionary certainly wasn't one of them. And now it was the only thing I wanted to do. Everything else was secondary. It occurred to me that even though I wanted to become a revolutionary more than anything else in the world, I still didn't have the slightest idea what I would have to do to become one. Okay, chapter 14 is next. We gonna move set. It's moving set time into the nighttime. We gonna pack it up again. We on 208 of Assata and autobiography. We gonna switch the sets up, but we still going. It ain't over with. What time is it? What we looking at? Oh, 8:42. Okay, we got enough time to get all the. We definitely got enough time to get it read. We on page 208, and it's 274 pages left. I mean 200. It's 274 pages. My fault. So yeah, we gonna get through this. So we gonna pack up the set, move to the other spot. Again, I just want to, before I end this video, for anybody that may be watching or get shared and get watched, this is the ongoing teaching. I say their name square. We are on day 4. Day number 1, we read The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Era of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. Day 2, we read The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. Day 3, we read They Can't Kill Us All by Wesley Lowry. And day 4, we are reading Assata, an autobiography by Assata Shakur. And we are doing this because Rockford is a city for decades that has dealt in oppression and exploitation and criminalization and stigmatization and dehumanization of the black people in its community, that has deprived resources from areas in which black people have dealt with de jure segregation and been pushed to. And so what we have to start doing is we have to figure out ways that people have struggled in the past to fix some of these issues, so that way we can incorporate it into the struggle that we are dealing with right now here in the present to absolve ourselves of the issues that we are facing in 2021. Again, January 5th, Denzel Duvant was assaulted by the Rockford Police Department. One of the officers there said that he thought he had a gun. Denzel Duvant was unarmed and he was beat mercilessly. October 2nd, 2020, Tyrus Jones was shot in the back while he was unarmed by Officer Dominic Manise. That officer was also the same officer that said that he thought he saw a gun when Denzel was assaulted. That was the things that happened at the latter end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. During the protest that took place in 2020, over 50 people were arrested from the protest from May 30th to the last protest at City Market on September 25th. Over 50 people were arrested. These people were out there protesting against police terrorism, and against mass incarceration and against racial injustice, and they were assaulted at the hands of this police department. And the city government and the power structure in this city has done nothing to try to get any kind of justice for those people, have done nothing to try to has done nothing to prove that they will going forward not allow things like this to happen. There's multiple videos online and stories online it would take forever to get into, but I want people to understand the context in which we are doing these things in. I want people to understand that we have 15 memorials up for people who have been killed by the Rockford Police Department or died in custody of the Winnebago County Jail, or were killed by a Metro Enforcement Agency, a private security within the city of Rockford. It's so many cities you can go to with the population that we have where this issue will not be that prevalent. You can go to cities even near in this area and the issue is not that prevalent. This city has a very deep issue, it's deeply rooted, and it's going to take an exerted effort for us to fix these things. And so that is what we are down here doing. We are trying to aim. It is inevitable that it will be protests and demonstrations coming up this spring and summer. It is inevitable that the state-sanctioned violence will continue to rain down on people of color and people of low income and poor class communities in this spring and summer. It is inevitable that that officer who killed George Floyd will not face the true will not face the same type of justice that a person who was not a police officer in his shoes would face. And so we have to understand that marching will take place. We have to understand that demonstrations will take place. We have to understand, though it may be 5 people or 10 people or 15 people when we set up to do something now, it will be a time where it is 100 and 200 and 300 people. So we have to make sure that we are setting the foundations for those things now, that we are not trying to be reactionary to a moment, that we are building something that can last through when people are interested and when people are not interested. We have to understand that it is not the people's job to wait hand and foot. It's not the people's job once some of these issues happen to have something built. For people who consider themselves to be revolutionaries or people who consider themselves to be for black liberation, and it's not that we are not the people, but we owe a duty to the people if we understand some of these concepts to set up apparatuses that will be able to help the people when they need. The next family that's going to be struck by police violence has no idea that it's going to be them. They might not even have an idea that it's going to happen. But if you know and I know, it's our duty to build something there so that way when they feel those things, we have an infrastructure for them to try to reach and attain some type of justice. And so that we can connect those families to the other families that have dealt with these things and build power bases and build blocks. Okay? And so that's what we are doing here. If you build it, they will come. And that's what we doing. We building it and they gonna come. All right, we moving sets. We outside. Oh, I gotta end it.